I was standing in the hospital room, looking at my mother's frail body in the bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her. The cancer had ravaged her. She weighed barely 90 pounds, her skin paper thin, her breathing laboured. The hospice nurse had told us that morning that it would be hours, not days. My mother was dying. My sister Rebecca sat on the other side of the bed, holding Mum's hand, whispering something I couldn't hear. She had been doing that a lot over the past week. Private conversations when I left the room, whispered exchanges when I was on the phone with my children, urgent discussions when I went to get coffee. At the time, I thought she was saying goodbye. I thought she was having final intimate moments with our mother. I didn't know she was stealing my inheritance. 2 days later, after Mom died peacefully in her sleep, after the funeral arrangements were made, after I had spent 3 days crying and grieving and trying to process the loss of the woman who had raised me, the estate attorney called me into his office. That's when I learned what Rebecca had done. Mum had changed her will, not months or years earlier when she was healthy and clear-minded. 2 days before she died. 2 days before she passed away from stage 4 pancreatic cancer, while heavily medicated with morphine and barely conscious. She had supposedly signed a new will, leaving everything, the house, the savings, all her possessions, to Rebecca. I was left with nothing. But to understand how this happened, how my own sister could do something so calculated and cruel, I need to go back to the beginning. My name is Margaret, and I'm 69 years old. My sister Rebecca is 65. We grew up in a typical middle-class family in suburban New Jersey. Our parents worked hard, saved carefully, and provided us with comfortable lives. Dad died of a heart attack when I was 48. Mum lived another 21 years as a widow, managing her finances carefully and maintaining her independence. Rebecca and I were never especially close, even as children. She was the baby of the family, indulged and spoiled. I was the responsible older sister, expected to set an example and look after her. Our parents meant well, but the dynamic created resentment on both sides. Rebecca felt like I was bossy and judgmental. I felt like she got away with everything while I was held to impossible standards. As adults, we lived separate lives. I married young, had 3 children, built a stable, if unremarkable, life. Rebecca never married, moved from job to job, had a series of failed relationships. She always seemed to be in some kind of crisis, financial, romantic, professional. And Mom always bailed her out. Over the years, I watched Mom give Rebecca money for rent when she was between jobs, pay off her credit cards when she overspent, loan her thousands for various business ventures that never materialized. When I gently suggested that Mum was enabling Rebecca's irresponsibility, Mum would get defensive. She would say Rebecca needed help, that she was going through a hard time, that family helped family. I stopped commenting. It was Mum's money to spend as she chose. But privately, I calculated that over the decades, Mum had given Rebecca at least $200,000 while giving me almost nothing. I didn't need Mum's money. My husband and I were financially stable. But the inequality bothered me. It felt like Rebecca was being rewarded for irresponsibility, while I was ignored for being responsible. When Mum was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 87, the prognosis was grim. Stage 4, inoperable, aggressive. The oncologist gave her 6 to 9 months. Mum took the news with remarkable calm. She said she had lived a long, full life and wasn't afraid of dying. She wanted to spend her remaining time with family, get her affairs in order, and die with dignity. I immediately rearranged my life to care for her. I lived 2 hours away, but I started driving to her house 3 or 4 times a week. I took her to doctor's appointments, helped manage her medications, coordinated with hospice services, made sure she was eating and comfortable. My husband was supportive. My children, all adults now, understood. This was what needed to be done. Rebecca lived only 45 minutes from Mom, but visited sporadically. She would show up occasionally, stay for an hour or two, then disappear for weeks. When she did visit, she spent most of the time talking about her own problems, her job stress, her difficult landlord, her latest romantic disappointment. She treated Mum's living room like a therapist's office, unloading her troubles, while Mum, weak and sick, tried to be supportive. I bit my tongue. Mum seemed happy to see Rebecca, and I didn't want to create conflict during Mum's final months. But inside, I was resentful. I was doing all the actual caregiving, while Rebecca breezed in occasionally for sympathy and attention. About 3 months before Mum died, I had a conversation with her about estate planning. Mom had always been private about finances, but I felt like we needed to have the discussion. I wasn't asking for anything specific. I just wanted to make sure her will was up to date, that her wishes were clear, that there wouldn't be confusion or conflict after she died. Mum assured me everything was in order. She said she had a will, it was current, and the attorney had everything documented. She said when the time came, her affairs would be straightforward. I asked if Rebecca and I were both listed as beneficiaries. Mum smiled and said the will was fair and reflected her wishes. She didn't want to discuss details because it felt morbid, but she promised everything would be fine. I trusted her. I trusted that Mom, who had always been fair and thoughtful, would divide her estate reasonably. I assumed she would acknowledge the inequality of past financial help by perhaps leaving me a slightly larger share, or at minimum splitting things 50-50. I never imagined she would leave everything to Rebecca, but at that point, of course, she hadn't. The will Mum was referring to, the one she had created 10 years earlier and updated 5 years ago, did split things roughly evenly between Rebecca and me. That will was clear, properly executed, and legally sound. That was the will I thought would govern Mum's estate. The final month of Mum's life was brutal. The cancer spread rapidly. She went from being weak but mobile to bedridden in a matter of weeks. Hospice care began. The focus shifted from treatment to comfort. We were in the process of saying goodbye. Rebecca's visits increased during that final month. Suddenly she was around all the time. She would show up at Mum's house and stay for hours. At first, I was glad. I thought she was finally stepping up, finally being present for Mum. I was exhausted from months of caregiving, and having Rebecca share the burden seemed like a blessing. But Rebecca didn't actually help with caregiving. She didn't change bedding or manage medications or help Mum to the bathroom. She would sit by Mum's bed and have long, quiet conversations. When I entered the room, they would stop talking. Rebecca would say they were just chatting, nothing important, just mother-daughter talk. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured they were having final, intimate conversations, sharing memories, saying things that needed to be said before it was too late. I gave them privacy. I thought I was being respectful. 1 week before Mum died, Rebecca called me and suggested we should probably contact Mum's attorney to make sure all the legal documents were accessible. She said she had been thinking about logistics and wanted to make sure we wouldn't have any problems after Mum passed. I thought this was surprisingly organized and thoughtful of Rebecca. I agreed it was a good idea. Rebecca said she would handle it. She said she had the attorney's contact information and would reach out. I thanked her for taking the initiative. What I didn't know was that Rebecca had contacted a different attorney, not the one who had handled Mum's affairs for years and who had drafted the existing will. A new attorney. Someone who specialized in quick estate work and who apparently didn't ask too many questions. 3 days before Mum died, While I was at home dealing with a minor crisis with my own family, Rebecca was at Mum's house with this new attorney. Mum was barely conscious at that point, drifting in and out of awareness due to pain medication. According to the attorney's notes, Mum was awake and alert during the will signing. According to the hospice nurse who was there, Mum was heavily sedated and barely aware of her surroundings. Rebecca presented Mum with a new will. This will left everything to Rebecca: the house, the bank accounts, the investments, all personal property. The reasoning stated in the document was that Rebecca had been Mum's primary caregiver and had sacrificed her own financial security to care for her mother in her final months. The will specifically stated that I had been largely absent and had not participated in Mum's care. Every word of that was a lie. But Mum, sedated and dying, signed the document. Or someone signed it for her. The signature on that will is barely legible, shaky, nothing like Mum's usual handwriting. But it was witnessed by the attorney and by one of Rebecca's friends, who Rebecca had brought along for that purpose. 2 days later, Mum died. I was with her when she passed, holding her hand, telling her I loved her. Rebecca was there too, crying dramatically. We hugged each other in grief. She told me she was glad we had each other to get through this loss. She knew what she had done. She knew that in a few days I would find out. But in that moment, she hugged me and cried and acted like a grieving daughter who loved her sister. The funeral was 4 days after Mum died. I planned most of it because Rebecca said she was too emotionally devastated to handle logistics. I chose the casket, arranged the service, wrote the obituary, contacted Mum's friends and extended family. Rebecca showed up, cried beautifully, accepted condolences, played the role of heartbroken daughter. I still didn't know what she had done. 3 days after the funeral, I received a call from an attorney I didn't recognize. He identified himself as the attorney who had handled the recent update to Mum's will. I was confused. I said Mum's attorney was James Whitfield, whom I had already contacted. The man on the phone said no, he had drafted a new will for Mum just days before her death, and I needed to come to his office to discuss the estate. I went to his office the next morning. Rebecca was already there, sitting across from the attorney's desk, looking somber. I sat down next to her, still confused about what was happening. The attorney opened a folder and began reading Mum's will. As he read, I felt my stomach drop. Everything to Rebecca. The house, worth approximately $400,000. The savings and investment accounts, another $300,000. The car, the furniture, the jewelry, all personal possessions. Everything. I was mentioned in the will only to specifically exclude me, stating that I had received sufficient support during Mum's life and had not been present during her final illness. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Rebecca. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat there staring at her hands, not speaking. I asked the attorney when this will had been executed. He said 3 days before Mum's death. I said that was impossible. Mum was barely conscious 3 days before she died. She was on heavy pain medication. She couldn't have understood what she was signing. The attorney said he had personally witnessed Mum sign the will, that she had been alert and clear about her wishes, that she had specifically requested these changes. He said the will was properly executed and legally valid. I said I wanted to see it. He handed me the document. I stared at Mum's signature at the bottom. It was barely recognizable, shaky, incomplete. Nothing like the strong signature she had maintained even into her 80s. This signature looked like it had been made by someone barely conscious. I looked at Rebecca again. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. She said she was sorry I was upset, but these were Mum's wishes. She said Mum had wanted to make sure Rebecca was taken care of because Rebecca didn't have the financial security that I had. I asked her directly if she had influenced Mum to change the will, if she had taken advantage of Mum in her final days when she was weak and medicated and dying. Rebecca got defensive. She said Mum made her own decisions. She said I was being insulting and suspicious. She said she couldn't believe I was attacking her when we should be grieving together. The attorney intervened. He said if I wanted to challenge the will, I had the right to do so, but I should understand that will contests were expensive, time-consuming, and difficult to win. He said unless I had clear evidence of undue influence or lack of capacity, courts generally upheld properly executed wills. I left his office in shock. I sat in my car for an hour, unable to process what had just happened. My mother had died, and my sister had stolen my inheritance through manipulation and lies. I hired my own attorney that same week. He reviewed all the documents, both the old will and the new one. He spoke with the hospice nurse who had been present during the signing. She told him that Mum had been heavily sedated that day, barely responsive, certainly not in any condition to understand complex legal documents. But she also said she had been in another room when the signing occurred and couldn't testify definitively about Mum's mental state at that exact moment. My attorney filed a will contest. The grounds were lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. Mum had been dying, heavily medicated, and not mentally capable of making major legal decisions. And Rebecca had systematically isolated Mum during her final weeks, had coordinated the creation of a new will with an attorney I believe she specifically chose for his willingness to overlook obvious problems, and had benefited entirely from the change. The legal process took 18 months. 18 months of depositions, document requests, expert testimony, and mounting legal bills. Rebecca fought every step of the way. She hired her own attorney, presumably using some of Mum's money, and maintained throughout that she had done nothing wrong, that Mum had been clear about her wishes. The case centered on Mum's capacity. My attorney brought in the hospice nurse, Mum's physician, and medical experts who reviewed her medication records. They all testified that 3 days before her death, Mum had been on high doses of morphine and was drifting in and out of consciousness. She was not in a state where she could understand a complex legal document or make informed decisions about her estate. Rebecca's attorney argued that Mum had brief moments of clarity even in her final days, that the will had been executed during one of those moments, and that Mum had been determined to make these changes. He produced Rebecca's friend, who had witnessed the signing, who testified that Mum had seemed alert and aware. The judge was skeptical but cautious. He noted the concerning circumstances, the last-minute change, the questionable capacity, the dramatic shift from an equal distribution to leaving everything to one child. But he also noted that the will had been properly executed according to legal requirements, with witnesses and notarization. After months of testimony and arguments, the judge ruled in my favor. He found that Mum had lacked testamentary capacity when she signed the new will, and that there was clear evidence of undue influence. The new will was invalidated. Mum's previous will, the one that divided the estate roughly equally between Rebecca and me, would govern. I had won. But it didn't feel like winning. The legal battle cost me $60,000 in attorney fees. It cost me 18 months of stress and anguish. It destroyed any remaining relationship with my sister. And it turned Mum's death and memory into an ugly legal spectacle. Rebecca was ordered to turn over the house, the accounts, everything she had already taken possession of. She fought that too, filing appeals that delayed the actual transfer of assets for another 6 months. When I finally got access to Mum's accounts, I discovered that Rebecca had already spent about $80,000 on a new car, on paying off her debts, on a lavish vacation. That money was gone. My attorney said I could sue Rebecca personally to recover it, but it would mean more legal battles, more costs, more time. I was exhausted. I decided to let it go. The house sold for $410,000. After paying off the remaining legal fees and settling various estate expenses, I received about $320,000. Rebecca received roughly the same. She wouldn't speak to me. All communication went through attorneys. At the closing, we were both required to be present to sign documents. We sat at opposite ends of a conference table. She wouldn't look at me. She signed her papers and left immediately. I haven't spoken to Rebecca in over 3 years now. I have no desire to. What she did was unforgivable. She took advantage of our dying mother to enrich herself. She lied in court. She dragged our family through an ugly legal battle rather than accept responsibility for her actions. My children are angry with her on my behalf. My husband thinks I should let go of the anger because it's only hurting me. But I can't let it go. Every time I think about those final weeks of Mum's life, I wonder what Rebecca said to her. How did she convince a dying woman to disinherit her other daughter? What lies did she tell? I'll never know. Mum took those answers with her. The money I eventually received sits in an investment account. I can't bring myself to spend it. It's supposed to be my inheritance, my mother's way of showing she valued me and appreciated my care. But it's tainted now. It represents a legal battle and family destruction rather than a mother's love. I'm 69 years old now. In theory, I have many years ahead of me, but I lost more than money in this situation. I lost my sister. I lost the peace of my mother's final days. I lost the ability to grieve her properly because I was too busy fighting to protect her true wishes. If I had known what Rebecca was planning, I never would have given them privacy for those conversations. I never would have left Mom alone with her. I would have been more vigilant, more protective. But I trusted my sister. I thought we were both just trying to make Mum's final days as comfortable as possible. I was naive, and Mom paid the price for my naivety. I'm telling this story because deathbed changes happen more often than people realize. Family members who have spent years being financially irresponsible suddenly become very present and attentive when an elderly parent is dying. They isolate the parent, control access, and manipulate them into changing estate documents. And because the parent dies shortly afterward, there's no opportunity for them to reconsider or explain their reasoning. If you have an elderly or seriously ill parent, here's what I learned too late. First, make sure estate documents are finalized while the parent is still healthy and clear-minded. Don't wait until they're on their deathbed to have these conversations. A will created when someone is healthy is much harder to challenge than one created days before death. Second, be present. Don't give potentially manipulative family members unlimited private access to a dying parent. I'm not saying you should be paranoid, but be aware. If a sibling suddenly becomes very attentive after years of absence, question their motives. Third, document everything. I wish I had kept detailed records of Mum's mental state in those final weeks, of who visited when, of what medications she was taking. That documentation would have made my legal case much stronger. Fourth, know that will contests are brutal. They're expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally devastating. They turn grief into legal warfare. Courts are reluctant to overturn wills without very strong evidence. If you're going to contest, make sure you have solid grounds and be prepared for a long fight. Fifth, understand that relationships may be permanently destroyed. Rebecca and I will never reconcile. The trust is gone. The family is fractured. Even if you win the legal battle, you may lose the family war. Finally, remember that money can be replaced, but time cannot. I spent 18 months fighting over Mum's estate when I should have been grieving and healing. I spent $60,000 in legal fees. Was it worth it? I tell myself yes, that I was protecting Mum's true wishes and standing up against manipulation. But honestly, I don't know. The money I eventually received doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like compensation for what I lost. Rebecca walks around believing she did nothing wrong. She tells people I'm greedy and vindictive, that Mum wanted her to have everything, and I couldn't accept it. She's rewritten the history in her mind to make herself the victim. Maybe she actually believes it now. People are very good at justifying their own actions. Mum's house sold to a young family with small children. I drove by it once after the sale. There were toys in the yard and a swing set being installed. It should have made me happy. Mum would have loved seeing children in her home. But I just felt sad. That house represented years of memories, and now it belonged to strangers because Rebecca's greed had forced us to sell it. I keep a photo of Mum on my desk. It was taken about 5 years before she died, when she was still healthy and vibrant. She's laughing at something outside the frame, her eyes crinkled with joy. That's how I try to remember her. Happy, strong, clear-minded. Not the frail, dying woman who may or may not have understood what she was signing in those final days. I hope she didn't understand. I hope she was too medicated and confused to know what Rebecca was making her do. Because if she was aware, if she really did choose to leave everything to Rebecca after I had spent months caring for her, that would be even more painful than the theft. But I don't think she knew. I think Rebecca took advantage of a dying woman who loved her and trusted her. I think my sister proved capable of something I never imagined, using our mother's death as an opportunity for financial gain. That's what I'll never forgive. Not the money itself, but the cruelty and calculation required to do what she did. You don't betray a dying parent that way if you have any decency or conscience. You don't manipulate someone in their final days of life for your own benefit. Rebecca did, and now she has to live with that. Maybe it doesn't bother her. Maybe she sleeps fine at night, convinced she did nothing wrong. Or maybe, somewhere deep down, she knows what she did. Maybe she thinks about it in quiet moments and feels shame. I'll never know. We don't speak. We're not sisters anymore. Not in any meaningful way. We're just two women who happen to share a mother, who fought over her estate, and who will carry this ugliness for the rest of our lives. The money sits in my account, untouched. A reminder of what I won and what I lost. Some inheritance that turned out to be